A heavy rain soaked the cracked concrete yard surrounding the grim, makeshift training facility on the edge of the city. Dim, flickering lights struggled to penetrate the thick, oppressive darkness that clung to the chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with the metallic scent of rust and sweat. The faint echo of distant sirens and the low hum of city life beyond the perimeter made the place feel isolated, a forgotten cage in the midst of urban chaos. Within one of the small, barred enclosures, Rex lay curled on a threadbare blanket, his powerful frame restrained by a worn leather collar and a heavy chain. His eyes, sharp and alert despite the obvious fatigue, scanned the shadows anxiously. The dim light caught the faint scars along his muzzle and limbs, silent testaments to the brutal conditioning he had endured. Around him, the cold walls echoed with the muffled sounds of other dogs, each trapped in their own torment. The facility was a grim crucible, designed to break spirits and forge weapons from creatures who once knew only loyalty and love. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Rex's ears twitched at the soft sounds beyond his pen. A hesitant shuffle, the faint whisper of steps that did not belong to the handlers. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a small figure moving cautiously between the cages. She was a girl, no older than 10, her clothes threadbare and muddied, her face etched with a mixture of fear and quiet determination. Her name was Sarah, and though she was a fragile shadow of childhood innocence, she had found an unlikely guardian in Rex. The bond between them was silent but unbreakable. In this place where cruelty reigned, Rex's presence was a beacon of comfort for Sarah. She had no family left, no home to call her own, and no one to protect her, except for this battle-scarred dog, whose loyalty had somehow transcended the harsh reality of their imprisonment. As she crouched beside Rex's cage, her fingers brushed the cold metal bars, and Rex responded with a low, steady whine, a sound that carried both reassurance and a warning to anyone who might threaten her. Sarah's eyes flickered with a fleeting smile as she whispered, "I'm here, Rex. I'm not leaving you." Her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the compound. Yet in that small moment, the world outside their cage seemed to fade, replaced by a fragile haven born of trust and shared survival. The facility itself was a labyrinth of shadows and fear, a place where the cruel ambitions of men sought to transform dogs like Rex into ruthless instruments of violence. The handlers were cold and methodical, their faces obscured by masks or hidden in the gloom, their voices sharp and commanding. They spoke of obedience and control, but their methods were nothing short of brutal. Rex had endured harsh training regimens, isolation, and relentless attempts to suppress the instincts that had once made him a loyal partner to a soldier. Yet, despite the cruelty, Rex's spirit remained unbroken. Deep within him, memories stirred. Flashes of open fields, the steady rhythm of boots on dirt, the reassuring touch of a familiar hand. Those memories were his anchor, the core of who he truly was beneath the layers of pain and conditioning. And as long as Sarah was near, those memories seemed within reach, a fragile promise of hope in a place designed to crush it. Outside the cages, the facility's corridors were lined with makeshift cells and sparse equipment, all arranged with a cold efficiency that spoke of a sinister purpose. The walls bore stains of neglect and violence, and the dim lighting cast eerie shadows that danced across the cracked floors. Cameras monitored every movement, their red eyes blinking like malevolent sentinels. The handlers moved with practiced precision, their voices low and harsh, issuing commands that echoed through the halls. In one of the guard rooms, a wall of monitors displayed the various pens and training areas. A figure sat hunched before the screens, his face obscured by a hood. The man's fingers tapped nervously on the control panel, eyes flicking between the images of the dogs and the girl. His name was Victor, a cold, calculating man who saw these animals not as living beings, but as tools to be molded into weapons. His plans for Rex were ruthless, and his patience was thin. But for now, Victor's attention was distracted by the girl. Sarah was an unexpected complication, a fragile anomaly in his carefully constructed world. She had slipped into the compound unnoticed, a ghost among the shadows, and now she lingered close to Rex's cage. Victor's jaw tightened as he realized that their bond might undermine his efforts to control the dog. Meanwhile, Sarah moved carefully from cage to cage, checking on the other dogs with quiet concern. Her small hands brushed the coarse fur of a trembling mutt, her voice a gentle murmur of comfort. In this place where cruelty was the norm, kindness was a rare and precious commodity. Sarah had learned to survive by staying invisible, by avoiding the harsh eyes of the handlers, and by trusting Rex to keep her safe. Rex lifted his head as she approached, his piercing eyes meeting hers with steady reassurance. He shifted slightly, pressing his massive head against the cold steel bars as if to shield her from the darkness surrounding them. Despite the chain that bound him, despite the harsh conditions, his presence was a silent vow. He would protect her, no matter the cost. The night deepened, and the facility grew quieter, the handlers retreating to their posts or disappearing into the shadows. Sarah settled beside Rex's cage, her back against the cold wall, drawing her knees close. The rain outside intensified, the sound of droplets pounding against the metal roof, a steady drumbeat in the silence. She rested her head against the bars, feeling the warmth of Rex's breath on her fingers. In this bleak, forgotten place, a fragile alliance of survival had formed. Between a dog once trained for war and a girl who had nowhere else to turn. Their bond was a silent rebellion against the cruelty that sought to consume them, a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. The world outside might be dangerous and unforgiving, but within the cold walls of this prison, Rex and Sarah had found a sliver of solace. As the first light of dawn crept through the barred windows, casting long shadows across the floor, the quiet resolve in Rex's eyes remained unshaken. The fight for their freedom had only just begun, and though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, the bond between dog and girl was a force that even the darkest night could not break. The sunlight filtered hesitantly through the grime-smeared window of the cramped room where Mike sat, his fingers tightening around a worn leather collar that had once adorned Rex's neck. The faint scent of leather and earth clung to it still, a tangible memory of a bond forged in the crucible of war. Mike's eyes, sharp yet shadowed with fatigue, traced the faint scratches and faded insignia etched into the collar. Reminders of missions shared, battles fought side by side. Rex had not always been a captive in a dingy compound on the city's outskirts. Once, he was a soldier's steadfast partner, a highly trained military dog whose loyalty had been tested in the most hostile environments imaginable. Mike remembered the first time he met Rex, a fierce, intelligent Belgian Malinois with eyes that burned with determination and a heart that matched his own. From that day forward, they had become inseparable, a perfect team navigating the chaos of combat with unspoken understanding. Together, they had faced the unrelenting dangers of covert operations, clearing hostile compounds and providing life-saving support to their unit. Rex's keen senses and unwavering focus had saved Mike's life more than once. And Mike's steady hand and calm command had guided Rex through the most harrowing moments. Their partnership was more than training. It was a bond forged in trust, courage, and shared sacrifice. But now, that bond was fractured. Rex was gone, stolen away by ruthless hands, torn from the life they had built. Mike's nights were haunted by the image of his partner confined in a dim, cruel facility, subjected to pain and twisted conditioning meant to turn him into a weapon against his own nature. The thought of Rex forced into servitude under a merciless criminal syndicate was unbearable. Mike's apartment was sparse, filled with military memorabilia and maps layered with notes. On a cluttered table lay a photograph of Rex, teeth bared but eyes soft, alongside a younger Mike in fatigues, both frozen in a moment of camaraderie. Next to the photo was a hastily scrawled note from Sarah, a small girl who had quietly stepped into their lives, becoming an unexpected thread of hope in a dark tapestry. Sarah was an orphan who had found safety, however fragile, in the shadow of Rex's protection. Mike had met her during a reconnaissance mission gone wrong, when chance and fate had entwined their paths. She was small and unassuming, but beneath her trembling exterior lay a fierce spirit and a quiet courage that had earned Mike's respect. Sarah's trust in Rex was profound, a silent testament to the dog's gentle nature beneath the scars and training. She had become a symbol of innocence in a world gone mad, and Mike had vowed to protect her as fiercely as he protected Rex. The room was heavy with anticipation as Mike reviewed the fragments of intelligence he had gathered. The syndicate responsible for Rex's abduction was led by Victor, a shadowy figure known for his ruthless efficiency and cold pragmatism. Victor's operation was vast, extending tentacles into illegal arms, trafficking, drug smuggling, and now the twisted manipulation of highly trained animals as weapons. Mike's gut told him that Rex was not just a pawn. He was a key piece in a larger, more dangerous game. As Mike paced the small room, his mind raced through every mission, every tactic, every piece of training that had once made Rex an unstoppable force. He knew the brutal methods Victor's men used to break the dog's spirits, to erase the loyalty that bound them to their handlers. The thought of Rex being forced to obey cold commands, to turn his skills against the innocent, ignited a fire in Mike's chest. Despite the overwhelming odds, Mike refused to give in to despair. He had spent years honing his skills as a Navy SEAL, mastering strategy, survival, and combat. Now, those skills would be put to the ultimate test, not just to rescue a dog, but to save a soul. Rex was more than a weapon. He was family. Sarah's presence in Mike's life had added an unexpected dimension to the mission. Her fragility was a stark contrast to the brutal world Mike inhabited, yet her resilience was undeniable. She had endured loss and hardship beyond her years, and her quiet trust in Rex had become a beacon of hope. Mike often found himself drawn to her strength, marveling at how the bond between a girl and a dog could withstand such darkness. Their connection was a silent promise that they would fight for each other's safety, no matter the cost. Mike's thoughts drifted back to the last time he had seen Sarah, huddled in a corner, eyes wide but unbroken, her small hands clutching a tattered blanket. It was that image that steeled his resolve. He would find them both. He would bring them home. Days blurred into nights as Mike dug deeper into the syndicate's network, piecing together clues from informants, intercepted communications, and surveillance footage. The facility where Rex was held was heavily guarded, a fortress of cruelty designed to break both body and spirit. But Mike's military training had taught him to see beyond brute force, to anticipate, to adapt, to exploit weaknesses. He began assembling a plan, focusing on speed, precision, and stealth. Time was running out. Each day Rex remained captive, subjected to the syndicate's brutal conditioning, chipped away at the dog's essence. Mike's urgency was fueled not just by duty, but by the unspoken bond that tethered him to Rex, a tether that transcended words and commands. It was trust. It was loyalty. Late one evening, Mike sat hunched over a map strewn with notes and photographs. His gaze lingered on the image of Rex, eyes steady despite the harsh surroundings. He whispered, "Hold on, partner, I'm coming." Sarah's safety was intertwined with Rex's fate. The syndicate had shown little hesitation in exploiting her vulnerability, and Mike knew that rescuing Rex alone would not be enough. Sarah needed protection, sanctuary, a chance to reclaim the childhood stolen from her by circumstance and cruelty. Mike's mission had become twofold: retrieve Rex and ensure Sarah's survival. As dawn broke, Mike packed his gear with methodical care. Weapons, communication devices, first aid supplies, each item was a tool in the arsenal he would wield against the darkness. He paused briefly, running a hand through his short hair, the weight of the past and the stakes ahead pressing down on him. The bond forged through countless battles, the silent understanding between man and dog, was the foundation of his determination. Rex was not just a trained military asset. He was a living, breathing partner who had stood by Mike through hell and back. That bond had survived the worst of circumstances, and Mike believed it would survive this test as well. With a final glance at the photograph, Mike slipped the collar into his pack, the leather worn but steadfast. Outside, the city stirred awake, indifferent to the quiet storm gathering at its fringes. But Mike was ready. The hunt for Rex and the fight for Sarah's safety had begun, and he would stop at nothing to bring them back from the darkness. The air inside the compound had grown colder, the sterile chill of the underground chambers seeping into every corner where Rex was confined. The relentless clang of metal doors and the sharp bark of commands echoed off the concrete walls, a harsh symphony that had become the soundtrack of his new existence. Days blurred into nights, each indistinguishable from the last, as the syndicate's handlers pushed him through brutal conditioning designed to erase who he once was. Rex's powerful muscles ached under the strain of constant drills and forced obedience. His keen mind, once sharp and focused with unwavering loyalty to Mike, now struggled against the haze of fear and confusion that the training imposed. The handlers wielded their tools of cruelty without hesitation. Harsh collars that bit into his neck, relentless shock collars that punished every flicker of resistance, and isolation chambers that gnawed at his spirit. Each attempt chipped away at the essence of the dog who had once been a hero. But beneath the surface, something stubborn remained. A flicker of memory, a pulse of defiance buried deep in his bones. The taste of freedom, the sound of Mike's voice, the touch of Sarah's small hand. These fragments defied the darkness. The conditioning sought to overwrite them, but Rex fought, refusing to become a weapon for the syndicate's twisted plans. In the shadows of the facility, Sarah's presence was a fragile thread of light. The syndicate had taken notice of her, a small, vulnerable girl who clung to Rex with quiet courage. To them, she was collateral, a bargaining chip in a game of power and control. Her safety hung precariously in the balance, and the cruel men watched her with calculating eyes, waiting for the moment to exploit her. Sarah's days were marked by fear and uncertainty, but she held on to hope with a resilience that defied her years. She whispered stories to Rex during stolen moments, tales of open fields and clear skies, of a life beyond these walls where the sun was warm and kindness was not a stranger. Her voice was soft but steady, a balm against the harshness surrounding them. "Hold on, Rex," she would murmur, her breath fogging the cold air. "We'll get out, I promise." The syndicate's leader, Victor, was a figure cloaked in menace and cold calculation. His vision extended beyond mere profit. He saw the power in breaking a dog like Rex and reshaping him into a weapon. Victor's office was a stark contrast to the grim facility, sleek, minimalist, and suffused with a chilling sense of control. Maps and surveillance feeds adorned the walls, each a testament to his reach and ruthlessness. Victor watched the progress reports with detached interest. The conditioning was working, but not quickly enough. Rex's resistance was stronger than anticipated, a stubborn flicker of loyalty that refused to be extinguished. Victor's patience thinned with each failed attempt to break the bond between dog and handler. He knew that if Rex could be turned, the syndicate's plans would gain a deadly edge. Meanwhile, Mike was closing in. Days of surveillance and intelligence gathering had led him to the outskirts of the city, to the very compound where Rex was held captive. His team, handpicked and skilled, moved with quiet precision through the shadows, each member aware of the stakes. The operation was risky. A single misstep could cost them everything. But Mike's determination was unwavering. Back inside the compound, Rex was subjected to yet another round of forced drills. The handlers barked orders, their voices harsh and unyielding. A device strapped to his collar emitted sharp, punishing shocks every time he hesitated or showed the slightest sign of defiance. The pain was searing, but Rex gritted his teeth, fighting to hold on to the memories that tethered him to his true self. Sarah watched from the corner of the room, her small frame tense but resolute. She knew the conditioning was breaking him, and the fear that gripped her was a heavy weight on her chest. But she refused to show it. Instead, she whispered words of encouragement, a lifeline thrown across the void. "You're stronger than this, Rex. Remember who you are. Remember me." The handlers grew frustrated, their methods growing harsher in response to Rex's stubborn resistance. The chain that bound him rattled as he strained against it, muscles taut with effort. His eyes locked with Sarah's, and in that fleeting moment, a spark of recognition ignited. A silent promise that the fight was not over. Outside the compound's walls, Mike's team prepared for the assault. Every detail had been scrutinized, every route mapped and remapped. The mission was more than a rescue. It was a battle to reclaim a soul lost in darkness. Mike's mind raced with scenarios, contingency plans, and the knowledge that time was running out. The tension was palpable as the team moved into position under the cover of night. The city's distant hum faded beneath the focused silence of the operatives. Mike's voice, low and steady, delivered the final orders. "We get Rex out. We get Sarah out. No one gets left behind." Inside the grim facility, the sounds of the approaching assault were muffled but felt keenly. Rex's ears pricked at the distant echoes, footsteps and voices that did not belong to the handlers. His body tensed, a surge of hope mingling with the pain and confusion. Sarah's eyes widened as the realization dawned. Rescue was coming. The handlers scrambled, shouting warnings and readying weapons, but the element of surprise was on Mike's side. The facility erupted into chaos as the team breached the compound, their movements swift and precise. Gunfire cracked through the corridors, and the handlers fell back under the relentless assault. Through the smoke and noise, Mike pushed forward, his focus singular. Find Rex, find Sarah, get them out. Rex, battered and broken but unbowed, heard the familiar voice cutting through the chaos. "Rex, it's me. Hold on, boy." The sound was a lifeline, pulling him back from the brink. With a surge of strength, born of desperation and loyalty. Rex strained against his bonds. The handlers tried to restrain him, but Mike was there, cutting the chains with practiced efficiency. Sarah scrambled towards Mike as the firefight raged around them, her small hands reaching out for safety. Mike swept her into his arms, his voice calm but urgent. "You're safe now." In the heart of the chaos, Rex's eyes met Mike's once more. Fierce, determined, and filled with the unbreakable bond that had endured the darkest trials. The syndicate's cruel plans were unraveling, their carefully constructed fortress breached by the force of loyalty and courage. Mike's team pushed forward, securing the compound and ensuring that Victor's men could no longer wield Rex as a weapon. Yet, even amidst the victory, the scars left by the conditioning ran deep. Rex's spirit was battered, his mind clouded by the brutal attempts to rewrite his nature. But the bond with Mike and the presence of Sarah were anchors to his true self. A reminder that beneath the pain, the heart of a hero still beat strong. As Mike led Rex and Sarah out of the shadows of the compound, the first light of dawn broke over the city skyline, a fragile promise of hope and redemption. The fight was far from over, but in that moment, the unyielding bond between man, dog, and child shone brighter than any darkness. The rain hammered against the cracked window pane of the small, cluttered apartment where Mike sat hunched over a worn wooden table, the dim light of a single lamp casting long shadows across his tense face. His eyes were fixed on a series of photographs spread before him. Images of Rex in his prime, the fierce Belgian Malinois standing alert beside Mike during countless missions. The contrast between those proud snapshots and the haunting memory of Rex's captivity was a bitter weight on his heart. Mike ran a calloused hand through his short hair, the edges of his mouth turning down in silent frustration. The echoes of the past warred with the grim reality of the present. Rex, once a trusted partner in battle, was now a pawn in the hands of a ruthless syndicate. The man responsible for this nightmare was Victor, a shadowy figure whose name was whispered with fear and loathing in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. Victor was no ordinary criminal. His cold, calculating mind sought power through control, and he saw Rex not as a living creature, but as a weapon to be forged and wielded. His empire spanned illegal arms, trading, human trafficking, and now the twisted exploitation of highly trained animals. To Victor, Rex was a prize, a dog whose skills could turn the tide in his ruthless games. Mike's fingers tightened around a crumpled letter, a threat scrawled in jagged handwriting that had arrived days ago, warning him to back off. But Mike was a soldier, forged in the fires of discipline and loyalty. He refused to be intimidated. Rex was more than a tool. He was family. And family was worth fighting for. The apartment was sparse but lived in, filled with remnants of a past life, dog tags hanging from a worn hook, tactical gear stacked neatly in a corner, and a faded photograph of Mike and Rex, their smiles frozen in a moment of hard-earned victory. Nearby, a small bed held a tattered blanket and a well-chewed toy, tokens of the bond that had once defined them. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, her small frame curled into a protective ball. She was a fragile presence, her wide eyes reflecting a world of pain and loss far beyond her years. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a spark, a quiet courage that had earned Mike's respect and resolve. She had become part of their makeshift family, a silent witness to the nightmare that had stolen Rex away. Mike's gaze shifted to her, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "You're safe here," he murmured, his voice rough but steady. "I'm going to get Rex back. I promise." Sarah's lips quivered, but she nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. She had come to trust Mike, the man who had fought to protect her, and through him, she clung to hope. The stakes were higher than ever. Victor's syndicate was ruthless, his reach deep and his resources vast. Intelligence suggested that Rex was being held in a fortified compound on the city's outskirts, a place designed to crush resistance and mold living beings into instruments of violence. The conditioning Rex endured was brutal. Physical punishment, psychological manipulation, and isolation meant to erase his past and rewrite his loyalty. Mike's military mind raced as he pieced together the syndicate's network. Victor's men were not mere thugs. They were trained operatives skilled in covert operations and armed with cutting-edge technology. Any rescue mission would require precision, stealth, and a willingness to face lethal resistance. But Mike was no stranger to danger. His years as a Navy SEAL had honed his skills in reconnaissance, infiltration, and combat. He had survived situations where the odds were stacked against him, relying on discipline, training, and an unbreakable will. Now, all those years of experience were focused on one mission: bring Rex home. The plan began to take shape. Mike reached out to trusted contacts, assembling a small, elite team capable of executing a high-risk operation. Each member was vetted for skill, loyalty, and discretion. The team's objective was clear: infiltrate the compound, extract Rex and Sarah, and neutralize any threats. As preparations intensified, Mike found himself haunted by memories of past missions. He recalled the bond that had defined his partnership with Rex, the silent communication, the shared understanding that transcended words. Rex was not just a soldier. He was a friend, a protector, a brother in arms. Losing him was not an option. The night before the operation, Mike stood alone on the rooftop of his building, the city sprawling beneath him like a living organism. The wind tugged at his jacket, carrying the distant sounds of sirens and restless life. He closed his eyes, picturing Rex's strong form, the gleam of intelligence in his eyes, and the gentle trust that had once defined their relationship. "Hold on, Rex," Mike whispered into the night. "I'm coming for you." Back inside, Sarah slept fitfully, her small body restless with dreams she couldn't escape. Mike watched over her, a silent guardian in the dark. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous, fraught with uncertainty and peril. But he also knew that the bond they shared, between man, dog, and child, was a force that no darkness could extinguish. The morning dawned cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the storm brewing within Mike's heart. The team gathered quietly in the dim light, each member readying their gear, their faces set with grim determination. Mike's voice was low but commanding as he reviewed the plan one last time. "We move fast, stay sharp, and watch each other's backs. Rex and Sarah come home, no matter what it takes." As they slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the maze of city streets and industrial backlots, Mike felt the weight of the mission settle over him like armor. The fight to reclaim Rex had become more than a rescue. It was a battle for justice, for redemption, and for the unbreakable bonds that define family. In the heart of the syndicate's fortress, Victor watched the unfolding events with a cold smile, unaware that the storm he had sown was about to engulf him. The game was changing, and the players were ready to make their move. Mike's mind was clear, his purpose unwavering. The path ahead was perilous, but the promise he had made to Rex and Sarah burned bright within him, a beacon guiding him through the darkness toward a future where loyalty and courage would triumph over cruelty. The city streets blurred past as Mike navigated the narrow alleys and industrial outskirts, the weight of the mission pressing down with every mile. His team, a small cadre of seasoned operatives, moved with practiced silence, their eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The intelligence was clear. The compound holding Rex and Sarah was heavily fortified. A bastion of cruelty designed to crush resistance and erase hope. Mike's mind raced as he reviewed the fragments of information gathered from informants and intercepted communications. The syndicate's conditioning methods were relentless: psychological manipulation, physical punishment, and isolation, all designed to break the dog's spirits and overwrite their loyalty. Rex's forced transformation into a weapon was not just a physical ordeal. It was a battle for his very soul. The urgency of the mission gnawed at Mike. Time was slipping away as the syndicate's plans for a violent assault loomed. Every moment Rex remained captive increased the risk of permanent damage. The possibility that the dog's true nature would be lost beneath layers of fear and obedience. And Sarah, vulnerable and alone, was caught in the crossfire of this cruel game. As the team approached the perimeter, Mike's gaze hardened. The compound sprawled before them, a fortress of high walls topped with razor wire, guarded by armed sentries and surveillance cameras. The air was thick with tension, the distant hum of machinery and the occasional bark of a dog cutting through the stillness. It was a place designed to intimidate and control. But Mike saw beyond the surface. He saw the cracks, the weaknesses waiting to be exploited. The operatives took their positions, each assigned to a specific task in the intricate plan. Communications were kept to a minimum, voices reduced to hand signals and brief nods. Mike's focus was absolute. Every step, every breath, calculated to maximize the chance of success. Inside the compound, Rex lay in a cold, dimly lit room, restrained but restless. The conditioning had taken its toll. His powerful frame bore the marks of harsh treatment, and his eyes flickered with confusion and pain. Yet beneath the surface, the spark of defiance remained. Memories of Mike, of Sarah, of a life beyond these walls, stirred in his mind, refusing to be extinguished. Sarah sat huddled nearby, her small hands clutching a tattered blanket. Fear was etched into her features, but so was determination. She whispered softly to Rex, her voice a fragile lifeline. "Hold on, Rex. Help is coming." The handlers moved through the compound with practiced cruelty, their eyes cold and unyielding. They barked orders, enforced discipline, and punished any sign of resistance. Victor's influence was evident in every corner. The cold efficiency of a man who saw living beings as tools to be wielded, not souls to be cherished. Mike's team began their infiltration under the cover of darkness. Silencers muted their gunfire, and shadows cloaked their movements as they neutralized guards and disabled cameras with surgical precision. The tension was palpable. One wrong move could trigger alarms and doom the entire operation. As they advanced, Mike's heart pounded not just with adrenaline, but with the weight of responsibility. Rex was more than a trained asset. He was a living testament to loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between man and dog. Mike's voice was low, but firm through the comms. "Stay sharp. We move fast and quiet. Rex and Sarah come home tonight." The team reached the holding cells, where Rex and Sarah were confined. The door was locked, but Mike's fingers worked quickly, bypassing the electronic keypad with practiced ease. Inside, the sight of Rex, restrained and wary, tightened a knot in Mike's chest. "Rex, it's me," Mike whispered, dropping to his knees beside the dog. "I'm here, boy. We're getting out." Rex's eyes met Mike's, a flicker of recognition breaking through the fog of conditioning. His body tensed, muscles coiling with the instinct to fight, to protect. Sarah scrambled forward, her small hands reaching out to stroke Rex's fur. Mike moved swiftly to remove the chains and restraints, his hands steady despite the urgency. The moment the last shackle fell away, Rex sprang to his feet, his powerful body trembling with pent-up energy and relief. The dog's loyalty, though battered, was intact. "Good boy," Mike murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We're almost out." The team prepared to exfiltrate, but the compound erupted into chaos as alarms blared and guards flooded the hallways. Victor's men moved with lethal efficiency, intent on reclaiming their prize. Gunfire echoed through the corridors, and the operatives engaged in a fierce firefight. Mike shielded Sarah behind him, his weapon steady as he covered their retreat. Rex, despite his injuries and confusion, instinctively flanked Mike, snarling and snapping at any threat. The bond between them was undeniable, a force that no conditioning could sever. As they fought their way through the compound, Mike's mind raced with strategies to evade their pursuers. Every corner held danger, every second was a battle. But the team's training and cohesion held firm, their determination driving them forward. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold as they burst through the compound gates. A waiting vehicle roared to life, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Mike helped Sarah into the back seat before sliding behind the wheel, Rex settling beside him with a weary but resolute gaze. The vehicle sped away from the compound, leaving behind the chaos and cruelty. Mike glanced in the rearview mirror, catching the glimmer of hope reflected in Sarah's eyes and the steadfast loyalty in Rex's. The mission had been perilous, the cost high, but the bond that had endured darkness and pain was stronger than ever. Mike's voice was steady over the comms. "Mission accomplished. We're bringing them home." Yet, as the city lights blurred past, Mike knew that the battle was far from over. The scars inflicted by the syndicate ran deep, and the road to healing would be long and fraught. But for now, they had each other, a team forged in adversity, bound by loyalty, and ready to face whatever came next. The safe house was a nondescript building tucked into the shadowed edge of an industrial district, its weathered brick facade blending seamlessly with the surrounding warehouses and forgotten storefronts. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the faint scent of antiseptic as Mike and his team worked quickly to secure the perimeter and assess their precious cargo. Rex lay on a makeshift cot, muscles taut but gradually easing as the adrenaline faded, while Sarah sat quietly nearby, clutching a threadbare blanket with eyes wide but alert. Mike moved with deliberate calm, his military training guiding every action as he coordinated with his team. The mission had been a success, but the real work was just beginning. Rescuing Rex and Sarah from the shadows of their ordeal and preparing for the inevitable reckoning with the syndicate that had torn their lives apart. The room was sparse but functional, furnished with medical supplies, communication equipment, and tactical gear spread across tables and counters. Marcus Cole, a fellow former Navy SEAL and trusted confidant, knelt beside Rex, gently inspecting the dog's battered frame. His hands were steady but gentle, fingers tracing the scars and bruises that told the story of the brutal conditioning Rex had endured. "He's tough," Marcus murmured, glancing up at Mike. "But this isn't just physical. The conditioning runs deep. We'll need to rebuild trust, reset his instincts." Mike nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "He's not just a dog. He's family. We'll do whatever it takes." Sarah, sensing the gravity of the moment, moved closer to Rex, her small hand resting lightly on his side. The dog responded with a soft whine, a fragile connection rekindled amid the pain. Mike watched them both, a mixture of relief and resolve settling in his chest. The team gathered around a large map spread across a table marked with notes and intel from the months of surveillance and reconnaissance. Victor's syndicate was a sprawling network, its tendrils reaching into the city's darkest corners. The compound they had raided was only one node in a vast operation that trafficked weapons, drugs, and now exploited trained animals for illicit purposes. Mike's gaze hardened as he pointed to the map. Victor's not going to back down. If anything, he'll escalate. We need to hit him where it hurts, dismantle his operations, disrupt his supply lines, and expose his network. Marcus added, "We have contacts in law enforcement and intelligence who can help. But we need solid evidence, something undeniable." The room grew quiet as the weight of the task settled over the team. The battle ahead was more than a physical confrontation. It was a strategic war, one that required patience, precision, and unyielding resolve. Mike's thoughts drifted briefly to Sarah, who sat quietly beside Rex, her gaze fixed on the dog's slowly steadying breathing. She was more than just a survivor. She was a symbol of what they were fighting for. Innocence threatened, but not yet lost. Protecting her was as vital as saving Rex. The days that followed were a flurry of activity. Mike and Marcus coordinated with trusted allies, gathering intelligence and building a case against Victor's syndicate. Surveillance footage, intercepted communications, and testimonies from informants began to paint a damning picture of the criminal empire. Meanwhile, Rex's recovery was painstaking. The physical scars began to heal, but the psychological wounds were deeper. Marcus worked tirelessly, using techniques that combined patience, positive reinforcement, and gradual exposure to familiar commands. Rex's eyes, once clouded with confusion and fear, slowly regained their sharpness and focus. One afternoon, Mike entered the training area, finding Marcus kneeling beside Rex, who was cautiously responding to a series of commands. The dog's tail wagged faintly, a subtle but significant sign of progress. "How's he doing?" Mike asked quietly. Marcus looked up, a hint of a smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "Better? He's remembering. The bond is still there. It just needs time to rebuild." Sarah, watching from the doorway, smiled softly and approached Rex, her voice gentle. "Good boy, Rex. You're coming back." Mike's heart clenched at the sight, a girl and a dog, both wounded but fighting to reclaim their lives. It was a testament to resilience and the power of trust. As the team prepared for the next phase of their mission, Mike reached out to Sheriff Alana Ramirez, a determined law enforcement officer who had long suspected Victor's involvement in the city's underbelly. Their meeting was tense but promising, a tentative alliance formed on shared goals and mutual respect. Sheriff Ramirez leaned forward, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "Victor's got eyes everywhere, but he's not invincible. With your intel and our resources, we can bring him down, together." Mike nodded, appreciating her candor and resolve. "We need to move fast. Victor's dangerous and desperate." The partnership was fragile, but necessary. Combining military precision with law enforcement authority, they crafted a plan to expose Victor's operations publicly, dismantle his network, and bring justice to those he had harmed. In the quiet moments between meetings and training, Mike found himself reflecting on the journey, the bond with Rex that had survived unimaginable hardship, the courage of Sarah, who clung to hope, and the team forged through shared purpose and sacrifice. He knew the road ahead would be perilous, filled with challenges that would test their strength and resolve. But with Marcus, Sheriff Ramirez, Sarah, and Rex by his side, Mike felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but the foundation for victory was laid. The pieces were moving, the allies assembling, and the promise of justice burning bright. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the safe house, Mike stood watch over Rex and Sarah, the silent guardians of a fragile hope. The battle for freedom and redemption had only just begun. But the unbreakable bonds of loyalty, trust, and courage were their greatest weapons against the darkness ahead. The night air was thick with tension as Mike and his team prepared for the assault on the syndicate's compound. The safe house was quiet but charged, every breath and movement deliberate, every eye sharp and focused. Outside, the city's distant hum faded beneath the weight of what was to come. A mission fraught with danger, but fueled by determination and the unbreakable bond between man, dog, and girl. Mike crouched beside Rex, running a reassuring hand over the dog's still trembling muscles. The conditioning scars were visible, etched into his skin and spirit. But Rex's eyes held a growing clarity, a flicker of the loyal partner Mike had known. Tonight, they would face the darkness that had stolen Rex and threatened Sarah, and they would fight to reclaim what was theirs. "Ready, boy?" Mike whispered. Rex responded with a low, steady growl, the sound a promise more than a warning. Sarah sat nearby, her small hands clenched tightly in her lap. Fear shadowed her wide eyes, but beneath it lay a fierce resilience. Mike caught her gaze and gave a brief nod, a silent vow that they would bring her to safety. The team moved out under the cloak of darkness, slipping through the maze of back alleys and industrial lots toward the compound's perimeter. Silenced weapons were loaded, comms checked. Every member knew their role. The plan was precise: infiltrate swiftly, neutralize threats, locate Rex and Sarah, and exfiltrate before reinforcements could arrive. As they approached the compound, the cold glow of floodlights and the sharp bark of guard dogs cut through the night. Security cameras scanned methodically, their red eyes blinking ominously. Mike signaled, and the team split into coordinated units, moving like shadows against the stark concrete walls. Mike led the charge toward the holding cells where Rex and Sarah were confined. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. The compound was a fortress, but the team's training and resolve were sharper still. Inside the dim corridors, Rex lay restrained, muscles taut with tension. The conditioning had left its mark, his eyes flickered with confusion and pain. But the moment he heard Mike's voice, a spark ignited. Recognition pierced the fog of fear. "Rex, it's me," Mike breathed, dropping to his knees beside the dog. "We're getting out." Rex's body coiled, ready to spring, and Sarah's small figure rushed forward, her hands trembling as they reached for Rex's fur. The silent bond between them was palpable, a beacon in the darkness. Mike worked quickly to remove the chains, his movements sure and steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Alarms blared, and the compound came alive with shouts and gunfire. Victor's men surged through the corridors, determined to reclaim their prize. The firefight was fierce and unforgiving. Bullets tore through walls, explosions rocked the facility. Mike's team held their ground, covering each other as they fought through the labyrinthine halls. Rex, despite his injuries and confusion, instinctively flanked Mike, snarling and snapping at any approaching threat. Sarah pressed close to Mike, her small frame shielded behind his back. Her wide eyes took in the violence with a mixture of fear and awe, but she clung tightly to the hope that had carried her this far. Mike's voice was calm but commanding over the comms. "Stay sharp. Move fast. Rex and Sarah are our priority." They navigated through the compound's maze, each corner presenting new dangers. The team's cohesion and training kept them alive, but the cost was heavy: wounded men and dwindling ammunition. Yet the promise of rescue drove them forward. Finally, They burst through the compound's main gate into the cold night air. A waiting vehicle roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness. Mike helped Sarah inside before sliding behind the wheel, Rex collapsing beside him with a weary but resolute gaze. As the vehicle sped away, Mike glanced back at the burning compound, the chaos of battle fading behind them. The mission had succeeded, but the scars, physical and emotional, would take time to heal. Sarah leaned against Mike, her breathing steady but fragile. Rex rested his head on her lap, the bond between them stronger than ever despite the ordeal. Mike's voice was low, yet filled with quiet triumph. "We're safe now. We're going home." The night carried them away from the shadows, toward a future shaped by loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable ties that had saved them all. The sterile lights of the veterinary clinic cast a pale glow over Rex's battered form as he lay on the examination table, his powerful chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Mike stood nearby, his jaw clenched, eyes sharp but shadowed with worry. The scars and bruises mapped the brutal conditioning Rex had endured, each one a silent testament to the cruel hands that had sought to break him. Dr. Elena Morales, a seasoned veterinarian with a gentle demeanor and steady hands, moved with practiced care, her voice calm as she examined Rex's injuries. "He's been through hell," she said softly, her eyes meeting Mike's with a mix of sympathy and resolve. "But he's a fighter." Mike nodded, his fingers tightening around the worn leather collar he now held like a talisman. "He's more than that. He's family." Outside the clinic, Sarah sat wrapped in a warm blanket, her small hands clutching a stuffed toy Mike had brought her. Her wide eyes reflected the trauma of recent days, but also a fragile spark of hope. Mike joined her, offering a reassuring smile that barely masked his own fears. The syndicate's grip was broken, its operatives subdued or scattered, but the battle had left deep wounds. Victor was in custody, his empire unraveling as law enforcement moved in on his remaining assets. Yet the scars borne by Rex and Sarah were not so easily erased. In the days that followed, Mike worked closely with Dr. Morales and a team of specialists to aid Rex's recovery. Physical therapy sessions were painstaking, coaxing movement and strength back into the dog's limbs. Each step was a victory, a reclaiming of the body and spirit that had been battered but not broken. But the psychological wounds ran deeper. Rex's eyes, once bright with intelligence and loyalty, sometimes clouded with confusion or flickered with shadows of fear. The conditioning had left marks on his mind, memories twisted by pain and coercion. Mike spent hours beside him, speaking softly, reinforcing commands, and offering touch that was steady and kind. The bond they shared was the foundation of Rex's healing, a tether to the past that anchored him to who he truly was. Sarah's presence was a balm as well. She moved cautiously around Rex, her gentle voice and tender touch bridging the gaps left by trauma. Her bravery, despite her own scars, became a source of strength for Mike and the team. Meanwhile, the evidence gathered from the compound and Victor's network was handed over to authorities. Sheriff Alana Ramirez spearheaded the effort, her determination unyielding. The legal wheels began to turn, dismantling the syndicate piece by piece. Mike and Alana maintained a cautious alliance, sharing intelligence and coordinating actions to ensure that justice would be served. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to protect the vulnerable. As Rex's condition improved, Mike arranged for a secure location where Sarah could stay, surrounded by care and safety. The girl who had endured so much was given a chance to reclaim her childhood, to heal in a world that was no longer defined by fear. One evening, Mike found himself alone with Rex in the quiet of the clinic's recovery room. The dog lay curled beside him, eyes closed but breathing steady. Mike stroked his fur, feeling the slow return of warmth and life. "You're coming back, buddy," Mike whispered. "One day at a time." The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges that would test their resilience. But the victory was real. Small steps toward healing, toward justice, and toward reclaiming what had been lost. In the stillness, Mike allowed himself a moment of hope, knowing that the bond between man, dog, and girl was a force that no darkness could extinguish. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, united by loyalty, courage, and the promise of a new beginning. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains of the modest cabin nestled at the edge of a quiet forest, casting warm light onto the worn wooden floor. Inside, the air was filled with a quiet stillness that spoke of healing, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence that had defined the past months. Rex lay stretched out near the hearth, muscles relaxed, eyes partially closed but alert. His breathing was steady, unburdened by the harsh conditioning that had once threatened to consume him. Mike sat nearby, a cup of coffee warming his hands as he watched the dog with a mixture of pride and cautious optimism. The journey from the dark days of captivity to this fragile moment of peace had been long and arduous. Each day was a step forward, a testament to resilience and the unyielding bond that tethered them together. Sarah moved quietly around the cabin, her presence a soft thread weaving through the space. The girl who had once been a frightened shadow was slowly reclaiming her innocence, her laughter beginning to echo through the rooms where silence had reigned. She paused by the window, watching a pair of deer graze in the clearing, the simple beauty grounding her in a world that was slowly becoming safe. Mike's gaze followed her, a tender smile touching his lips. He remembered the fragility of those early days, the fear that lingered in Sarah's eyes, the haunted look in Rex's. Now, hope was taking root, growing stronger with each passing moment. The recovery was far from complete. Rex's mind still bore the scars of the syndicate's cruel conditioning. There were days when shadows flickered behind his eyes, moments of confusion or hesitation that reminded Mike of the battle that still raged beneath the surface. But those moments grew fewer, replaced by a rekindled instinct and trust. Training sessions resumed with patience and care. Mike worked alongside Marcus Cole, whose expertise in canine rehabilitation proved invaluable. Commands were reinforced not through force, but through encouragement, rebuilding the partnership that had once been unbreakable. Rex responded with growing confidence, his agility and focus returning as his spirit mended. Sarah, too, found solace in routine and companionship. She accompanied Mike and Marcus during training, her gentle voice coaxing Rex forward, offering praise and affection. The trio formed a unique family, bound not by blood, but by shared trials and unwavering loyalty. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Mike sat with Sarah on the porch steps. She leaned against him, her voice soft but steady. "Do you think Rex will ever be the same?" Mike considered the question, his eyes tracing the horizon where the sky blazed with the colors of dusk. "He's healing, not just his body, but his mind and heart. He'll never forget what happened, but he's stronger than that. We all are." Sarah nodded, a small smile breaking through the shadows. "I'm going to help him, like you said." Their conversation was interrupted by the familiar sound of Rex's paws on the wooden porch. The dog approached with a confident gait, tail wagging gently, eyes bright with trust. He settled beside them, resting his head on Sarah's lap. The moment was simple, yet profound, a symbol of progress, a testament to the power of healing and hope. Mike reached down, running his fingers through Rex's fur, feeling the warmth and life that had returned. Outside the cabin, the forest whispered with the sounds of evening, birds calling, leaves rustling in the breeze. It was a world that had once seemed distant and unreachable, now a sanctuary for healing and renewal. Mike's thoughts drifted to the future, uncertain but filled with possibility. There would be challenges ahead, moments when the past threatened to cast its long shadow. But the bond they shared was a shield against the darkness, a source of strength that could not be broken. As night fell, Mike stood on the porch, looking up at the stars scattered across the sky. The journey had been brutal and painful, but it had forged something unbreakable. Rex, Sarah, and Mike, bound by loyalty, courage, and the promise of new beginnings. In the quiet of the night, Mike whispered a vow to the stars. We're not just survivors. We're family, and we're just getting started. The morning light spilled softly through the cabin's windows, dust motes dancing in the quiet air as Mike sat on the worn porch steps. A steaming cup of coffee cradled between his hands. Rex lay stretched beside him, the dog's deep breath steady and calm. A far cry from the fractured spirit that had once been held captive and broken. Nearby, Sarah's laughter chimed like a fragile bell, carrying through the open door as she played with a weathered ball in the yard. The world around them was no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary. A place where healing had taken root in the fertile soil of trust and endurance. Mike's gaze drifted over the peaceful scene, the bond between man, dog, and child, a quiet testament to survival and resilience. They had endured darkness and cruelty, yet here they were, bound by a loyalty that had refused to be severed. Rex lifted his head, eyes meeting Mike's with a steady warmth. The scars etched into his body and mind were reminders of a brutal past. But in those eyes was the unmistakable spark of the dog who had once been a hero, fierce, loyal, and unyielding. Mike reached down, running his hand through Rex's fur, feeling the pulse of life and strength beneath the surface. Sarah bounded over, breathless and bright-eyed, her small hands reaching out to stroke Rex's broad head. "You're my best friend, Rex," she said softly, her voice filled with the innocence of a child who had found safety and love. Rex responded with a gentle nudge, a silent affirmation of their bond. Mike watched them, a swell of emotion tightening his chest. The journey had been long and treacherous, from the depths of captivity to the fragile dawn of freedom. The scars they carried were invisible to most, but etched deeply into their soul. Yet, through it all, their connection had endured. A lifeline through the storm. The past was a shadow that lingered, a reminder of the cruelty inflicted by Victor's syndicate and the cost of their fight. But it was also a story of courage and redemption. The courage of a dog who refused to be broken, the bravery of a girl who clung to hope, and the relentless determination of a man who would stop at nothing to reclaim what was lost. Mike rose from the porch, his footsteps steady as he joined Sarah and Rex in the yard. Together, they moved as one. A family forged not by blood, but by shared trials and unshakable loyalty. The air was filled with the simple joys of the present, the laughter of a child, the contented sigh of a dog, and the quiet strength of a man who had found purpose beyond the battlefield. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the trees and fields, Mike felt a profound sense of peace. The war was not over. The world was still filled with shadows and dangers. But in this moment, In this place, they had found something worth fighting for. The bond between them was a beacon, a shield against the darkness that lingered beyond the forest's edge. It was a promise that no matter the trials ahead, they would face them together, with courage, trust, and unwavering loyalty. Mike's voice broke the silence, soft but resolute. We've come a long way, but this is just the beginning. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with trust and hope. Rex wagged his tail, the rhythm steady and sure, a heartbeat that echoed their unbreakable bond. The story of a seal, his canine partner, and the girl they saved was far from over. It was a tale of bravery and heart, of scars and healing, and of a loyalty that transcended the darkest of nights. Together, they had reclaimed their lives, and together, they would write the chapters yet to come.